Hey, y'all. I'm Jay. I'm your host for Unfeigned the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. And I want to talk about what stops us from being transparent, from being vulnerable. Because when it comes to healing, vulnerability and transparency are key. That's how healing begins. And yet, a lot of times, when we make the choice to heal, right, we have those three stages: choose, commit, confront. The choice is the easy part. That's the simple part. And when we choose to heal, we choose to do what's necessary for our healing. And we enter into that commit phase, right? Where we're going to commit to doing whatever it takes, whatever's necessary to carry out that choice. That's when it becomes tough. But what is it that holds us back? What is it that stops us? Right? And I think more often than not, it has to do with fear. And fear has many different faces, right? Like when we say I'm afraid to do this, it can mean a lot of different things. But in the context of healing, I think when fear grips us, we know we want to heal. We make the choice to heal. We know that. And we know we want to be different. And once we discover what it is, right? Once we realize the quote unquote thing that we need healing from, that we need to heal from, we choose to heal, and we know what it's going to take. We know what we have to do, especially if we're following these guidelines of choose, commit, and confront, right? Because we've made the choice to heal. Now we're committing to that choice. But now it gets tough. And this is where healing takes place. This is where the toughest part of this format is, but it's also where healing happens. And when you're in between that commit and confront stage, we know what we have to do. We know what we should do. So why don't we do it? And a lot of times, I think fear becomes so paralyzing, and it grips us, and it causes us to be hesitant to be vulnerable and transparent. And so why? Why is that? I've been thinking about what it is. Like why does that, first of all, where does the fear come from? Like, why is the fear so gripping? We know we want to heal, and we so badly want whatever it is. We so badly want it to be different. We so badly want it to be healed. We don't want it to be broken anymore. And more often than not, we know what needs to be done, whether we've discovered it on our own, or we've been told it, or we've been helped getting there. And we know what needs to be done. And when we get there, this fear just takes over. And where does that come from? And why does it do that? Like I said, this podcast is all about my story. And it's specifically my story over the last 9 years. And so everything that I talk about is based on my experiences. And I've learned a lot. I've healed a lot. And the healing process is just what it implies. It's a process. And so when you're healing, when your healing journey begins, right? It will shapeshift along the way. It'll morph along the way. But this healing journey that we're on, it's a process. It's long. There's ups and downs, and there will be things that you heal from time to time. And so you can heal from this thing while you're still at a different stage regarding a different thing, right? And so the big picture is your healing journey that you're on. But along the way, there's small wins, small little victories here and there, different healings, quote unquote. And so this is what's happened over the last 9 years with me. So when I talk about fear and where it comes from and why it's there, here's what I've learned. I think that this fear that grips us, this fear that's so paralyzing, that stops us from doing what's necessary for our healing. I think it comes from how we see ourselves, how we view ourselves. For instance, if I need to tell you something, if I want to be vulnerable and transparent, and maybe let's just say maybe I've been hiding something and I want to come clean, I want to tell you something, right? Because I know that I need to do that in order for me to heal. And so I get myself to the point where I'm ready to do this. I've chosen to do this. I'm committing to it, and I'm right there. I'm ready to tell you, and all of a sudden I become afraid. Well, why do I become afraid? What am I afraid of? And I think it's because what happens is, um, I assume, right? I'm projecting my view onto the person that I'm about to open up to, and so what happens is I assume that they're going to see me a certain way. So if I tell them this, they're going to think I'm uh, incapable of doing something. They're going to think I'm stupid. They're gonna think that I'm ignorant or naive, right? They're gonna perceive me in a way that I'm insecure about, right? So that's how I see me, right? I have this view, I have this perception about myself, and again, this is an example. I may something specific may come to mind, but in this example, it's a hypothetical situation, but I have this perception of me, and what I do is I project that onto you, and I assume that you are automatically going to see me as that, as the way that I've perceived myself because in this situation. And then all of a sudden, this fear starts to grip me because I don't want you to see me this way. I don't want you to think of me that way. I don't want you to perceive me that way. I sure as hell don't want you to tell me I'm that. And so these thoughts pop into our head, and you might even know what I'm talking about, but these thoughts pop into our head where, well, if I tell them this, they're just going to react this way, or they're going to think that I'm, fill in the blank. And we say these things, or we listen to these things from our inner critic, because this is our, remember, on a previous episode, you go back to this inner critic, and in these moments, especially when we get caught up in this, I perceive myself a certain way in this situation. I project that onto you. I assume you're going to perceive me like this. And so then our inner critic pops up and says, hey, what's up? They're going to think of you like this. They're going to think you're ... They're going to react ... And we start to listen to our inner critic. We start to give attention to our inner critic, too much attention usually. And then doubt starts to creep in, and we start to believe that. And the fear just grows. The fear just grows, right? When the fear came from a place of insecurity, and we convinced ourselves that to hide is better than to open up. That hiding, that not doing what it takes, not being vulnerable and transparent, that would be better for my healing. But I think what happens in reality, what we're thinking is that it just feels safer. And it's less painful. And so this fear comes from that place. This fear comes from that place of we don't want to feel that way. We assume this other person is going to make us feel that way. And so we avoid that. Well, why does this happen? Right? So that if that's where it comes from, why does it happen? I think we don't want to be hurt. By being vulnerable and transparent, in essence, what we're doing is we're becoming fully exposed. Right? If we're really going to be vulnerable and transparent in whatever this situation is, let's say it has to do with money. And so we are going to have a discussion about finances with our partner. And what we're doing in actuality, we are exposing ourselves because we're going to be vulnerable and transparent. And it might be about something that you've been hiding. It might be about something that you've messed up. It might be about something like you don't know how to manage the finances, but you've had that role and you've said you're good with it, but in reality you don't know what you're doing. And so you're about to have this conversation that's extremely vulnerable and transparent. And what you're doing is you're exposing yourself. And when we expose ourselves, there's a risk. There's a risk of being hurt. Because we can't control the way somebody receives what we're about to share. We're being vulnerable and transparent. We're giving that, but we cannot control how somebody receives our vulnerability and transparency. And that's scary because there's a risk of being hurt. It's sort of a catch-22 because this is how healing takes place. In order for me to heal, vulnerability and transparency are necessary. But if vulnerability and transparency are necessary, there's a risk of being hurt. Or I should say there's a risk of feeling pain. Because whoever I'm being vulnerable and transparent with may actually respond the way I'm perceiving them to, or I'm assuming they will. They may not, but they might. And that's out of our control. We can't control what the other person does or how they react. We're taking control of what we're doing. We've chosen to heal. Now we're committing to it. And by being vulnerable and transparent and being willing to expose ourselves, basically whatever this situation is, being willing to expose where we're at regarding this specific situation, we're confronting the issue. And we can control our behavior and all that. We can control that, our part in it. But the fear comes from not being able to control the other party. And so we have this, the fear is born out of this this incorrect view of ourselves, how we perceive ourselves based, regarding this specific situation, how we perceive ourselves, that we've projected it onto the other person, that we assume they're going to respond in that way. And so this fear is born out of that and it grows. And then what happens is it grips us. It becomes paralyzing. And we convince ourselves that we're going to feel pain. And we don't want to feel pain because we're going to expose ourselves. And that's not safe. It doesn't feel safe. And we convince ourselves that hiding is safe. And quite honestly, hiding might be safe. It might be safer. It might feel safer. But you won't heal. You may be safe at the moment, but you'll be safe in your brokenness. And when you come out of hiding, you'll still be broken. If you choose vulnerability and transparency, and you take the risk of feeling pain because you exposed yourself in that situation, you may not feel safe, but you'll heal. And when that situation is over, you'll be healed from it. And that's when true growth will take place. You see, if we let this fear stop us from being vulnerable and transparent, what we're really doing is we're allowing fear to stop us from healing. Right? Fear is stunting our healing. Fear is stunting our growth. Because if we act out of a place of brokenness, if we act out of a place of fear, we'll always choose safety. We'll always choose safety. It's natural. It's a natural human reaction. If we're afraid, we'll seek safety. But unfortunately, regarding healing, safety promotes brokenness. In this situation, okay, hear me what I'm saying. In these scenarios, when it comes to being vulnerable and transparent regarding a specific issue that you need to heal from, safety will promote brokenness. The safety that comes from hiding. Please don't hear me wrong when let me say this. Please don't think that what I mean is that you should put yourself in unsafe situations. That is not what I'm saying. That's not my intention to mean that at all. Because there are unsafe situations that you should not put yourself in. There are relationships that actually harbor unsafe behaviors. Okay, that's a whole different set of rules. And that's not what I'm referring to. But if you're in a situation that's not actually unsafe, and we can get into more of what I mean by that, just reach out to me directly. But if you're not in a situation that is actually unsafe, then that's what I'm referring to. The safety that comes from hiding, the safety that comes from lying, the safety that comes from choosing not to be vulnerable and transparent and open and honest with your partner. If doing so would lead to an unsafe environment, then yes, that's something completely different, and I can talk to you about that. But that's not what I'm referring to here. So when we allow fear to convince us that the better choice is this kind of safety, the hiding, the lying, that will keep us in our brokenness. But if we choose vulnerability and transparency, if we choose to confront this issue, whatever the issue is, and only you know what that is, if we choose to confront the issue head on, come face to face with it, we're confronting the fear by confronting this issue. And we're choosing to be vulnerable, transparent, open, honest. Well, then we start to heal. And then true growth takes place. So y'all, I know this was a quick episode, but it's super important because everything that I talk about basically has its foundation in those three I still got to come up with something to call these, but you know, be curious, not judgmental. That's one playbook for life. The other playbook for life is whatever I give my attention to, I'll become attracted to. Whatever I become attracted to, I'll pursue. That's another playbook for life. And then there's choose, commit, and confront. Those 3 stages are another playbook for life. And everything that I talk about on this podcast, my story, it's all found, it's found at its foundation are those 3 playbooks for life. And generally, there is, if there's an obstacle, if there's something that's hindering us, if there's something that's stopping us from being vulnerable and transparent, and I want to say this, vulnerability and transparency are at the core of healing. And those 3 playbooks for life have been a crucial aspect of my healing over the last 9 years. And I would dare to say that they are just in general a crucial aspect to healing. And vulnerability and transparency have been a catalyst for healing from many things in my life. And even things that I'm still confronting, even things now in my life. I've healed from many things. I've healed from small things. I've healed from extremely large things in my life, extremely destructive things I've healed from. And I've healed from minor things, things that maybe weren't as destructive, but still important and still broken. And vulnerability and transparency have always been the piece to all of that. Without vulnerability and transparency, I would not have healed, period, from any of it. And if not every time, it's been most every time. The thing that stopped me was fear. I was afraid of something. I was afraid of being exposed. I was afraid of being found out. I was afraid of being seen for who I truly was. Because, you know, I'd lied. I was hiding. I put out this mask, this image, and I was at risk of being exposed as a fraud. I was afraid of being known as a fraud. But if we're being honest with ourselves, in our brokenness, a lot of times being a fraud is what leads to brokenness. Surely hiding, lying, putting out this image that you're hiding behind this mask, and that's extremely fraudulent. Like, it's not who we are. We're not being true to who we are. We're not being vulnerable and transparent, authentic, exposed. So we're frauds. And I was afraid of that. More often than not, that's what kept me. That fear, and it's how I perceived myself in whatever that situation was. I saw myself as that. And that was painful. And I projected that onto whoever I would have needed to be truthful with. I projected it onto them and assumed, well, of course they're going to perceive me like that. They're going to think I'm a fraud. And I thought of myself like that, but I didn't want to feel the pain of them thinking like that. It's silly, honestly. It's crazy because I could take the pain I caused myself, but I couldn't take the pain that I thought someone else was going to cause me for the very thing that I was causing myself pain. Like it was actually true. It's crazy. And so fear, I went through everything I talked about on this episode, and I allowed the fear to convince me that safety, this kind of safety in the hiding, in being a fraud, was better for me. When in reality, I just didn't want to feel pain. I didn't want to feel that kind of pain. And unfortunately, it kept me in my brokenness and never healed from things until I became vulnerable and transparent. And that is when healing started. That is when healing took place. And the growth that I experienced was tremendous. So y'all, I understand a lot of this podcast, being that it's my story, my experiences. I understand that it won't resonate with everyone. I get that. Well, I should say this, not everything will resonate with everyone. And so the purpose of this podcast is so that people can be encouraged by my story and maybe helped by my story. Maybe something in my story can give them answers to certain things. I look forward to hearing people's stories so that we can grow together. But I also understand that my story will help someone. Someone can be encouraged by it. And I'm saying that that was my prayer for this podcast. And I'm saying that because y'all have reached out to me. I've interacted with some of y'all. And so I know that some of y'all have been encouraged. I know that some part of my story has encouraged you. Some part of my story has helped you. Some part of my story maybe even just inspired you or spurred you on to do something or think something or say something or whatever. And that's the point of this whole thing. So maybe you are experiencing something similar. Maybe you are going through something. And this podcast is helping you, is providing some hope, maybe providing some clarity, or maybe this episode specifically speaks to something that you're going through. Maybe this episode specifically speaks to your circumstances or your situation. And I would love to talk to you about it. Even if you've already reached out, reach out again. Let's connect. Let's continue to connect. Man, it would be awesome to connect with you on a regular basis. Right? To track each other's growth. Right? Where we're on our journeys together and we're hearing from each other and learning and growing and maturing. That would be awesome. Like it's that kind of stuff gets me excited. So reach out. Let's, you can email me unfeignedpodcast@gmail.com, or you could reach me at any of the social media, well, specifically Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Send me a message there. And let's do this thing together. So I'm excited for y'all to be on your healing journey. And I want to hear about it. I'm super pumped. I'm super hyped about y'all that listen to this podcast. I mean, it's still wild. It's still wild to me. It really is. Like I can't even explain it, but it's wild that y'all listen. It's wild that y'all reach out. I prayed for this kind of stuff, but it's still overwhelming, right? To think that I'm having conversations with people about healing, and that's all just so wild. I love it. It's awesome. So y'all, I'm super appreciative of you. I love that you're listening. I hope that you'll stay with me on this journey. Definitely hope that you'll reach out. I appreciate y'all so much. So grateful for you. And until next time, we'll see you then.